This episode began as a thread on Joyce Carol Oates' X/Twitter timeline back in August of 2025, where Ms. Oates generously engaged with a post of mine regarding Harold Pinter's unproduced Proust screenplay. The discussion that followed between Oates, other writers, and cinephiles shaped everything you were about to hear. Much of this episode is my direct reaction to the question of whether Proust or any great author can truly be adapted to the screen without losing their voice. I am deeply grateful to Ms. Oates, whom I considered one of the greatest of all living authors. But before we dive into that architectural machine, we start with an homage of a different sort to Ryan George and the internet's favorite pitch meeting.
So, you have an adaptation of an unadaptable memoir about the persistence of memory for me.
Yes, ma'am, I do. It's an adaptation of Marcel Proust's masterpiece, In Search of Lost Time.
Oh, using the word masterpiece sarcastically is tight.
I wasn't being sarcastic.
Regardless, adapting a massive 7-volume, 4,000-page French literary monument about memory, time, and Madeleine cookies sounds like it's going to be a real uphill battle.
Actually, it's going to be super easy, barely an inconvenience.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because we're not just adapting the book, we're adapting Harold Pinter's unproduced 1972 screenplay.
So wait, you're telling me we're taking the most introspective, plotless, memory-saturated novel ever written and handing it over to the king of long pauses and menacing small talk?
Exactly.
Fair enough. Now, who are we casting?
Going young and hot. Tom Holland as a young Marcel. Timothée Chalamet as a slightly older Marcel. And Zendaya playing basically every woman he's obsessed with.
Wow. 2 Hollywood heartthrobs passing nervous bisexual energy back and forth for 6 hours is definitely going to get people talking.
That's the plan. And for that iconic framing device Pinter wrote, the mysterious yellow screen,
yeah?
We've got Pedro Pascal.
Pedro Pascal is playing a color?
Yeah, he just stares into the lens and his only line in the whole movie is time. Exactly.
So you're telling me we spent $180 million so Pedro Pascal could say one word in a thick accent?
It's symbolic.
But hasn't Proust already been adapted multiple times, including Time Regained?
Hey, shut up.
That's fair.
Besides, did the yellow screen turn out to be a wall in those versions?
What?
Exactly. Poor Pedro ends the film as a bit of yellow paint in a Vermeer painting. Isn't that awesome?
How did you even get in my office? I'm Aaron Brown.
I'm Sheila Blumen.
I'm Jennifer Trujillo.
I'm Eric Trometer. And this is World Cinema History. Hey, this is future Eric. After part 1 came out, a French literature professor reached out and gently pointed out that I had been pretty naive about how difficult Proust is for most readers. She was right. The snobbery and gatekeeping around the book completely flew over my head. It's not Victor Hugo. It's a much steeper climb. I actually struggle with a lot of great literature myself, so Proust didn't feel that much harder to me than Henry James or Virginia Woolf. I reread Ulysses every 3 years because it's comic at its heart, and Joyce keeps rewarding you for repeat readings. Proust deliberately doesn't do that. But now I've heard from enough people to realize it hits differently for most readers. I've read the novel twice, and I won't be reading it again anytime soon. That should tell you something. I still want to make this material more accessible and push back against some of the gatekeeping, but I clearly underestimated how intimidating the mountain is. Lesson learned. Anyway, let's talk about how Harold Pinter climbed that mountain. So last week we were looking at one adaptation of Marcel Proust's seminal novel, In Search of Lost Time, a.k.a. Remembrance of Things Past. However, we ran out of time before we could get to the second adaptation, which was Harold Pinter's adaptation of all 4,300 pages into one slightly too long movie. So this week, let's take a look at the Pinter version.
Harold Pinter. 1. Yellow screen, sound of a garden gate bell. 2. Open countryside, a line of trees, seen from a railway carriage. The train is still, no sound, quick fade out. 3. Momentary yellow screen. 4. The sea, seen from a high window, a towel hanging on a towel rack in foreground. No sound, quick fade out. 5. Momentary yellow screen. 6. Venice, a window in a palazzo, seen from a gondola. No sound, quick fade out. 7. Momentary yellow screen. 8. The dining room at Balbec. No sound, empty. 9. Exterior, the house of the Prince de Guermantes. Paris, 1921.
I had been reflecting while I was asleep on what I had been reading. But sometimes these reflections took an odd turn, and I myself became the subject of the book. I was a church, a quartet, the rivalry between two great kings. I wondered what time it was. I heard the whistling of trains in the distance. And then I would be completely awake, and I would spend the greater part of the night remembering our life in Cambrai, at my great-aunt Léonie's house in Balbec, then Paris, Doncières, Venice, and elsewhere. I remembered the places, the people I had known, what I had seen, what I had been told.
Continue Marcel's progress into the drawing room.
Cambrai.
Voices, faces, the wigs
Seen
and
from the
makeup,
train
combined
as
with
we
the extreme
arrived
age
for
of those
Easter
who with
week.
difficulty
Cambrai
stand, sit,
was no
gesture,
more than a
laugh,
show.
give the impression of grotesque fancy dress.
But we are a history of cinema podcast, and so I do want to give the history of this particular adaptation. It's really a small, closed loop in European cinema. We started this adaptation series with Visconti and Suso Cecchi D'Amico's The Stranger, starring Marcello Mastroianni, Raúl Ruiz's Time Regained, starring Chiara Mastroianni, Marcello's daughter, and Catherine Deneuve, who is her mother. This Proust project, it's a direct reaction to the unadaptable beast Visconti himself spent years obsessing over. He had massive plans. Alain Delon was going to play Marcel. Marlon Brando was going to play Baron de Charlus. But the budget exploded and his health failed, and his producer, Nicole Stefan, dumped them for Joseph Losey and Harold Pinter. Pinter refused to even read their script, and that insult started a legendary spite war. The legend, which I choose to believe because it's too good not to be true, is that Visconti later directed Pinter's Old Times in Rome from inside his Rolls-Royce, turning it into a hyper-sexualized disaster just to spite Pinter. But if D'Amico's name sounds familiar, it's because her career is the literal DNA of post-war European cinema. She co-wrote most of the neorealist classics and would go on to write the story for Derek Jarman's Caravaggio, a film so popular here on the podcast we had to do 2 episodes about it.
Good evening and welcome to the Arthur Ludlow Memorial Baths, Newport, for this year's finals of the All England Summerise Proust competition. As you may remember, each contestant has to give a brief summary of Proust's à la recherche du temps perdu, once in a swimsuit and once in evening dress.
Good evening and welcome! For as Proust would say, la malade imaginaire de recondition et de toute séance est bientôt la même chose. Remember, each contestant this evening has a maximum of 15 seconds to summarize à la recherche du temps perdu, and only Proust over here, you can see exactly how far he gets.
All right, my official entry for the Sumerize Proust Challenge. Consider this your previously on for the roughly 3,700 pages that lead up to the film Time Regained. If you're jumping into Time Regained without reading the novel, you're walking into the final act of a lifetime worth of baggage. It all starts with a cookie, a Madeleine dipped in tea. Proust writes, no sooner had the warm liquid mixed with the crumbs touched my palate than a shudder ran through me, and suddenly the vicissitudes of life had become indifferent to me, its disasters innocuous, its brevity illusory. That was a catalyst. From there, the narrator spent years watching his high society idols destroy themselves. A key pivot comes when the narrator witnesses Van Toy's daughter having lesbian relations in front of a portrait of her recently deceased father. This moment cracks open the hidden, closeted world of the French aristocracy. From there, he watches Charles Swann, a brilliant Jewish art connoisseur, get ostracized by the aristocracy and driven mad by his jealous, obsessive love for a courtesan named Odette. He watches that same nightmare repeat with Albertine, a woman he essentially keeps as a prisoner out of pathological jealousy only for her to die. Throughout the story, the women's lesbian trysts, Odette, Lee, and Albertine, become symbols of the men in their lives' of inability to possess the object of their desire, while the increasingly open homosexual affairs of Charlot and Saint Loup signal the moral and social decay of their classes. In the background, we get the after effects of the Franco-Prussian War, the rise of French populism, and the Dreyfus affair, tearing apart the social order. Time Regained picks up just after the narrator's ill health forces him into bed rest, and he's able to reflect on these events and write them down. How did I do? Drop your version in the comments.
I don't think any of our contestants this evening have succeeded in encapsulating the intricacies of Proust's masterwork. So I'm going to award the first prize this evening to the girl with the biggest tits.
If you're coming to Proust for a thrill, you're going to be bored to tears. Anyone reading In Search of Lost Time for titillation will be deeply disappointed, assuming they make it past Swann's Way at all. But if you're looking for a surgical breakdown of how human desire, obsession, and social power actually function in a room, then you're in the right place. Just my opinion, of course. His sentences go on for pages. His density makes rereading paragraphs mandatory, and he assumes a lot of knowledge about art and history that his readers may not have. Oh, and he is a terrible snob. This is not to dissuade anyone. I'm just a guy with a podcast. I read the book twice in my life and probably will never read it again. Others will disagree and have dedicated their whole lives to it.
The sacred Jedi texts. Oh, read them, have you? Well, page turners, they were not.
But to get a better understanding of Proust as a whole, let's look at one of the most fascinating unproduced screenplays in the history of cinema. Harold Pinter's Proust adaptation pulls off something far more Wittgenstein than Proust. He treats dialogue not as a means of communication, but as a Wittgensteinian language game. Let's take the scene at the restaurant. Saint Loup drops this big, intense monologue about how high society is full of Philistines, and Pinter's stage direction just say, Saint Loup waits for Marcel to respond. Marcel does not. The hors d'oeuvres are served. They eat. Classic Pinter, language as a weapon, silence as a shield. It's all drawing room gossip, conversational power plays, and repeated phrases where the real meaning is trapped in the context of the room. Marcel finally breaks his silence, but not to talk philosophy. He just says, I thought you were a little harsh with your groom. We're not going to dissect the whole screenplay scene by scene today. As we learned a couple of weeks ago with The Trial, explaining Pinter is like trying to explain the color yellow. But notice how Pinter's script itself is a perfect machine. It opens on a mysterious yellow screen and closes on that same yellow screen, only it's actually a wall in a Vermeer painting. Art, literally, fixing time. But that one restaurant pause tells you everything you need to know about how he translates 4,000 pages of internal memory into raw behavioral tension. Proust wasn't just writing memories. He built a massive architectural machine. Something mentioned on page 47 of Swann's Way might not pay off until deep into the final volume, over 4,000 pages later in Time Regained. The ending is hidden inside the beginning. That long, slow burn, that what the hell is going to happen, is what keeps you hooked. Gerard Genet showed how Proust used chaining and narrative momentum, not just isolated flashes like Time Regained. It's why modern long-form stuff like Game of Thrones owes more to Proust than people will admit. Pinter clearly understood this better than almost anyone. That's what makes his screenplay such a joy to read. He respected the machine. He tried to preserve that whodunit tension while turning the long internal monologues into tight, syncopated dialogues and loaded silences. Ruiz, as we saw last week, took the opposite route. He went fully postmodern. He's happy to pull the whole thing apart and leave the shiny toys scattered across the floor. He floats through the beautiful fragments. He focuses more on the dreamy atmosphere than keeping the narrative momentum driving forward. Sheila, given your long struggle with people's need for narrative and stories, when you watched Time Regained, did Ruiz's dreamy approach work for you, or did you ever find yourself wanting more of that Pinter-style plot-driven narrative and long-game payoff?
The art, and perhaps not just of the film, but of the book itself, the art is, as the title says, reviving the past into the present, connecting it to the present. I think that style of mixing, juxtapositioning all these experiences into 2 hours and 42 minutes, or into even 4,000 plus pages, that is a perfect way to do it. I feel very inspired to go deeper into this system of layering time in that way.
Now, Aaron, you had a chance to read the Pinter screenplay. How do you feel he handled the transitions of time compared to what you saw in the Ruiz film, which you were less positive on because you found it confusing?
It was a lot more linear, so it was less confusing. Things tied together in a more natural way. Even when he was jumping around in time, things led to the next scene in a way that made more sense in the film that we watched. There was more logic to it, so even when it was non-linear.
Character development as well.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for character development. So you had expectations of how these people were supposed to behave, and so when they behaved in a different way, you actually were aware of that.
It made a lot more sense, and when things were revealed, it was easier to understand what was going on because you had the context from previous scenes, even if it was different time periods.
What did you think of his use of the screens as transition items as opposed to narration? So you had the different colored screens, and each one was connected with a different memory. So the yellow screen turned out to be the wall in the Vermeer painting. The red screen turned out to be the cobblestones going up. These were all very important memories in the Proust novel, and each one is shown initially as a screen and then turns into an actual object that triggers a memory.
I think that's a better approach than narration. Narration can be really clunky, show not tell, and letting you realize what the colors meant, I think, was a very clever way to do that.
To me, one version, the Pinter version, is trying to build the machine properly. The other is perfectly content with playing on the pieces of the floor, and that is the ghost fight at the center of this episode. Pinter's icy structural blueprint versus Ruiz's fever dream. It's wild that Ruiz leaves out the Dreyfus affair, literally the most explosive political event of the era. It's like making a movie about the Titanic, but deciding the iceberg is too political, so you'll just make the ship sink because it's having a bad day. Ruiz essentially rigs the game by cutting out the Dreyfus affair and the lingering political mess after the Franco-Prussian War and the trauma of World War I. He removed the real reasons why the aristocracy collapsed. Instead of showing their downfall was caused by specific political failures and the rise of populism that Napoleon III helped trigger, he makes it look like they just naturally faded away due to social drift and entropy. Unlike the narrator, the real Marcel Proust was born to a Jewish mother and a Catholic father and lived as a closeted queer man. For him, the social erosion of the world wasn't just entropy or a natural process. It was a personal matter of survival. Many of Proust's own characteristics, his Jewish mother, his love of art, his outward snobbery, and his rather risky sexual life, were portrayed through characters like Swann and de Charlus. Ruiz conveniently ignored this in Time Regained, leaving us to think the collapse was inevitable. Sure, by tracing the outsider Swann, a Jew who married below his station, navigating those same parties, gave us the collapse in real time, not in sped-up class-conscious cliches. Back to Aaron, I know you weren't a fan of how Pinter handled the comedy of menace in the trial. Knowing that, how do you feel his acid tongue and surgical precision worked with the suffocating social gossip of the Belle Epoque in this film? Or is Pinter just fundamentally allergic to the warmth that even a decaying society requires?
I think that it fits the attitudes of the people more than trying to soften it. They're a catty bunch. I've seen other writers do similar things with, all the rivalries and the infighting and the politics among the aristocracy. I think letting them be bitchy was a good choice.
Now, reading the screenplay, did you see what I was trying to explain in the trial episode about how Pinter writes in a way that you can't read it as traditional dialogue? It's almost like reading a piece of music in terms of the way he stages the pauses and the little repeated phrases and the long silences and those indicators and the meter of it. Even though you don't actually see the stresses, could you kind of hear how he turned Proust into a metered, kind of poetic sounding dialogue?
Honestly, I didn't. I don't really read scripts that way, which sounds bad. This is going to be a callback to the previous episode where Kuhn was talking about books are meant to be read, screenplays are meant to be seen, and plays are meant to be performed. That's kind of, when I read a script, I sometimes have a hard time imagining how it would be performed. It's more I get the gist of what's happening. It doesn't always sink in exactly what the intent was or how the performance is intended to go.
Sheila, do you wish you'd had more of the context, or did the film that Ruiz made work for you enough that you didn't actually need that context, and that probably would have just made the film longer?
I feel content and satisfied with the film. That is not to say that if I would read Pinter's screenplay or read the book, maybe I would feel differently. But with what I got from the film, I feel quite satisfied in terms of getting an idea of what I'm supposed to be reading or absorbing about a story or about Proust himself.
I'm content with having watched it the way that I did. I do feel a little bit of remorse in not having read it, but I think I will try to read it if I can, given my time constraints at the moment and our other watching things, and then try to reflect on the film. And if not, I think it would have given me different context and different reminding of a new take on it. I think it would be interesting to get Pinter's take on it. And Aaron, you were saying that I did look a little bit in the interim, and it was written and has been performed. The screenplay has never been made into a movie, Pinter's screenplay, but it has been performed as a play, if I understand correctly.
And it was done once on radio as well. Which is
oh my God, as an audio drama?
Which is how I heard it the first time. But there's no recording of it that I can find anywhere. I heard it live.
How old were you when you heard it? Do you remember?
20.
So it was a different take. You had heard it earlier. How cool. Did it impact you differently when you heard it, having read it, Aaron?
I thought it was genius. I thought it was the perfect summary of the novel that I had read. And I had dragged that novel around with me an entire summer. I originally had encountered the Proust screenplay through Stanley Kaufman, the film critic for the New Republic, who had edited a book of historical American film criticism, and one of them, going back all the way to the silent era, was called The Proustian Camera Lens, and he had published that collection, and Harold Pinter had contacted him and sent him a copy of the screenplay, which then was kind of published as a novel. I then heard the live version of it and went to the Michigan State University Library where they actually had a copy of it, but I wasn't a student at Michigan State, so I had to sit in the library and read Pinter's screenplay, and I read it all in one sitting for that reason, and it was a revelation to me because I did not realize you could do that, any of those things on film. However, that's an interesting point, because we don't know if this film would have been any good. For instance, the director of this, Joseph Losey, who had worked with Pinter on some very, very good films, such as The Servant and The Go-Between, was one of the more inconsistent directors in history and probably made at least two of the best really bad movies in Boom and The Assassination of Trotsky. And for The Assassination of Trotsky, he was so incredibly drunk that Richard Burton actually had to direct himself in some scenes.
This was at the time of accident. This was a press conference chaired by Andrew Saris.
Pinter and Losey are in New York promoting this movie.
This is a press conference mostly for college students and college young people, and it's chaired by Andrew Saris, and Ross Whetstone writes about it in the Village Voice. I'd like to hear your explanation of the accident at the end of the movie. One of the student editors asked Pinter. I'd like to hear yours, Pinter replied. When someone asked if perhaps the relevance of the movie could be fully understood only by an English audience, Pinter reportedly blew his nose, pocketed his handkerchief, and said, "What do you mean by relevance?" The questioner offered message instead. Message? The same fate befell significance. Andrew Saris commented that everyone had been asking what the homecoming meant. I'd understand questions about meaning, Pinter replied, if I knew what the word meaning meant.
He's just being a jerk.
He was playing with them.
Oh, I know, but
Go on.
But there's wholesome play and unwholesome play. And later, I have no explanation for anything I do at all. By nature explicatory, Losey nevertheless joined in the Trappist ritual. Was there any social comment implicit in the large quantities of alcohol consumed in the movie? I don't know what you mean by social comment. To this, Pinter added, people just had bottles around and drunk out of them. Asked if he edited his own films, Losey replied, it depends what you mean by edit. Well, did he make the final cuts himself? It still depends on what you mean. The critic John Simon accused the pair of insulting their audience and asked Pinter if he was aiming to do away with words altogether. This got a reply, I love words. I just try to use them selectively. Simon then pointed to some factual errors about Oxford in the film and spoke of the sublime disregard for reality that pervades the entire film. After the meeting, he announced, I've seldom seen two such consummate phonies on one stage at one time.
Bravo, John Simon. Thank you, John.
So we don't know whether this would have been a good movie, but I do know that it's a very good screenplay. But to me, I'm maybe giving the wrong impression, and Aaron, you can correct me, that Pinter stripped down Proust to make it gritty. He was doing something, I think, much more radical. He took that purple prose, the internal swirling monologue, and subjected him to the Wittgenstein test, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. And I think that's the genius of the adaptation, is that whereas the novel is run-on sentence after run-on sentence after run-on sentence, what Pinter was able to do was talk through the silences, and I think that's what makes it an ingenious piece of work, but I don't know if that would have actually worked on film.
I think with the amount of detail he included in the stage directions, it could have been made into a film with the right director. Could have been made into a really good film with the right director and the right cast. I'm kind of glad it wasn't produced by such an inconsistent director. I wonder if it could be made now. I think.
Yeah, make a nice Netflix series or something. They did make a French version of it as a TV series in 2012. I don't recommend it, though. It's very soap opera. It is very big on the costumes, very big on the big performances, and very big on the dramatic scenes. But it is well loved because it in 4 hours it gets a lot of Proust on screen. But that's the French miniseries. I didn't particularly care for it, but there are smarter minds than I am about Proust say that it's very, very good.
I'd like to see an adaptation of it, a modern one.
Well, if
Honestly,
you can track it down, the French TV series, you might like it. But just keep in mind, it's very serialized TV.
Yeah.
It takes Proust and it turns it into a soap opera.
Like Downton Abbey?
Very much like Downton Abbey. Or Upstairs, Downstairs.
Yeah.
If you
so I might
remember
actually like it. Yeah. So I might actually like it, because I did like Downton Abbey, even though it was very much a soap opera.
Then you might enjoy it. I thought it was too Downton Abbey.
I'd have to see if I can find that. But, yeah, that would be interesting.
It used to be on YouTube. I don't know if it still is.
Yeah. I'll have to look and see. I do think that it would be... I think the way that it's written, I would really like to see a film version of it, even if it's 4 hours long. I'd just like to see how that would come out.
It might be better as like a limited series or a long film. The long films are coming into trend, but it would be cool to see what it would look like. Or even a staged play of it done well would be cool, I think.
Well, and we're going to deal with a couple of longer adaptations. Next week we have The Godfather at 3 hours, and then we're going to end this series with the same Luchino Visconti who wanted to adapt this, and the same very long adaptation of an important novel with The Leopard. That's the episode that will be having Mike Karate as our guest on. We'll have some longer adaptations to kind of compare. We watched Luchino Visconti direct The Stranger and be just so rigid to the text while giving a completely different moral than Camus. I would have really liked to have seen what Visconti could have done with this story after watching The Stranger, The Leopard. Then again, I'm also, and this was part of that thread on X that started this episode, I would also be a little worried because at the end of his career, Visconti got a little sloppy, just like Joseph Losey. I know it's a beloved film, but I thought his version of Man's Death in Venice was a complete mess. I didn't like it at all. And I think his films like Ludwig and The Damned are widely considered to be actually very, very bad films. So I don't even know for sure if Visconti's version would have been any good. And that's the great thing about these screenplays. It's all shit. It is all in our imagination.
The silver screen of our eyelids.
The impetus, the style, the critical eye of Proust in the 1800s, and he died, I think, like 103 years ago. That gives the content something that perhaps we cannot interpret today based on the fact that we are a very, very, very different society today.
I don't have a very philosophical mind, so things do go past me. But, yeah, the screenplay was so much clearer. I was able to understand the characters better and what they were doing better and see them more clearly than with everything being as muddled as it was in the film.
I mean, I'm always intrigued by different perceptions and different thoughts on things. So whether I find the time or make the time or choose to have the time to make it happen, I would like to. I hope I don't push it so far that then I lose remembering what I saw in the film, the 2 hours and 43 minutes of the film. But it makes me want to read it and rewatch the film or read it in close enough to the film. And I agree. I think it would be cool to find the audio drama or to see a play production of it, because it's different interpretations of a piece, right? And it allows for the different views and interpretations allow for different views and interpretations from me and from other people in the audience. And I think that's one of the coolest things about art. And Sela brings it up all the time, right? It doesn't matter what the artist, it does, I think, for me, but it really doesn't matter what the artist meant in creating a piece. It matters how the piece affected you, impacted you, moved you at the time of you appreciating, absorbing, seeing, reading, hearing the piece. And that's one of the coolest things about art, right? I think. And then getting to talk about it with other people and even with yourself. Like, what did young Eric think? What did middle-aged Eric think? It's interesting to hear those things. And even for me, rereading or rewatching something.
So Proust.
It is. Well, then even more so that I like Proust. But I love that concept of, it's amazing how much things change. And some things don't. Like, some things are permanent comfort blankets for each of us. I think many people have books and films or songs or whatever that they put on that if you could put time in a bottle or spot in a bottle, you would, and it would put you there.
That letter to Andre Gide, one of the things when Gide is chiding him for staying in the closet as a homosexual, Proust says he doesn't consider himself a homosexual. He is what he is when he does what he does.
And that is something that I'm very happy to have heard that. And to me, that fits very much, not only into the era of Proust, because I think he would probably see himself differently because of it, but I think that's very, very genuine and very realistic. I don't think the label that we use today is really necessary, as long as you are living what you are. Of course, he had the ability in some ways to do it, but I find that very, very interesting too, that expression.
Well, but to me, it's interesting for the opposite reason, because it shows how Proust viewed time. Since time is this temporary state of being, that he can move from one state of being to the other. To Jennifer, I don't think she views being a lesbian as being her sex life. I think she views it as being a part of not just a lifestyle, but her life, and a part of her. Proust did not see that because his view of time was so esoteric that he thought that in terms of, I was, that day 2 years ago, but I'm not now. Which,
yes, but
doesn't make any sense to us now.
Yeah, but I see the weight not on time, even though I did mention it. I see the weight more in his conviction, in his articulation of just being who he was. And I'm having a hard time explaining that, but I really like the idea of saying, I don't have to call myself a homosexual. When I'm with a woman, I'm with a woman. When I'm with a man, I'm with a man. And there's no reason for me to call it bisexuality or anything else. I am who I am in that moment. And
so we're back to the Wittgenstein language game. We never escape it.
It's just existential. I am who I am.
Yes, I agree with that. And I also agree with part of what Eric said about me, that it's not my lifestyle, quote unquote. It's not just what I do in the bedroom. There are plenty of asexual, aromantic, or romantic asexual people on the LGBTQIA plus or queer spectrum, and even on the hetero spectrum. So yeah, all of those things can be true at once. And it is more than just one thing.
But it is fascinating that that's how Proust explained it to himself at that time. Speaking of time, I think we're out of time. Whether it's Pinter's Precision or Ruiz's Dreamscapes, we're still trying to map the same lost time. Massive thanks to Jen, Scylla, Koom, and Aaron for helping us pull these two episodes together and helping to pull those forgotten chunks of cinema history out of the dark. Next week, we are pivoting from a 4,000-page French masterpiece to a pulp crime novel that became one of the defining monuments of American cinema. And for that monumental task, I am officially handing over the host mic. Next week, Aaron Brown is taking the wheel to give us a breakdown of Francis Ford Coppola's 1972 titan, The Godfather, which is great because I completely and utterly hate that movie.
I'm looking forward to next week.
Yeah, don't want to miss it. Until next week, I'm Eric Trowater, and this has been World Cinema History. Okay, wow.
Why are you so sad? You worked a long time on preparing this.
9
so it went long.
Months.